All right. Hi, everyone. I would first like to thank everyone for joining us today and to introduce a little bit of what's going to happen today in the talk taking place right now. First of all, the Ministry of Culture and Youth launched the Burda Award in 2004 to commemorate the birthday of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It honors the mastery of artists and creators from all over the Arab and Islamic world who participate in three traditional Islamic disciplines, calligraphy, ornamentation, and poetry, while also paying tribute to the complexity of the Arabic language. The awarded work are original submissions inspired by the Prophet's life and the Holy Quran and the Hadith as well. And as of 2018, over 292 winners have been awarded. Now, in its 16th edition, there is a fourth category that has been introduced, and it's Arabic typography, which is we as a jury will talk about today. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am Alanoud Bouhamas, an instructor at the College of Arts and Creative Enterprises at Zayed University, and I would allow the jury members to introduce themselves as well. Huda?
I'm Huda Abi Faris. I'm the director of the Khat Foundation. I'm also a designer and a publisher and design activist.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Salman Qasimi. I'm a graphic designer, the founder and principal of Fikra, and an educator and graphic designer.
So as we start receiving questions from the audience, and please feel free to ask as many questions as you possibly want. I know there's a lot of curiosity around the new category, and this is what we're here for today. So we'll start our discussion until we get the questions. And our discussion is going to start with why rhythm. And as you guys know, we picked the theme rhythm for the Arabic typography category. So we'll start with why did we choose that theme? Anyone wants to start off that conversation?
Yeah, I would like to say something about it. I thought, when we talked, we decided that it would be nice to start with a theme that kind of naturally connects all the parts that we would be looking at in a way. So we are talking about typography, and typography is about, organizing text in a line or in a composition. So there's always a rhythm, how you place them. But also, of course, rhythm is about poetry that exists, the way you place words and how they connect to each other. It's in music, how the different sounds and beats fall together. And in some ways, these three things work beautifully together. Even in calligraphy, rhythm is also about how the body is moving while you're writing. So we thought it was a good start as a theme for the first time we do this, introducing this category from the awards. I think we should, maybe if you want to add something.
I mean, I want to add the fact that in both the Emirati Malid, the Moroccan, actually, and the Egyptian, and many more, you'd notice that there is a particular movement with and the synchronization of the movement. So there is something actually quite poetic about the way that it is moving all together in one particular direction and the other. I know that there is a particular sequence to it. So the synchronization of that movement as well, when you look at it visually, really kind of inspires you to think of rhythm as well. And funny enough, there is one of the years, Al Burda Festival had the light calligraphers Karim Jabbari, and while the Malid was happening live, he was actually playing with calligraphy, light calligraphy live while the Malid was happening. And that really actually reminds you of movement and rhythm. And it was a beautiful live performance. And I encourage everyone to actually have a look at it.
Yes, well said. I think, also just linking design and the way that we design and we make a composition, we're always constantly thinking of how can we start to balance things within a composition, but also how can we start to create this specific rhythm. But now when we start to marry both the idea of poetry and using letter forms and creating these letter forms on a composition, how can you communicate that in a way that amplifies the notion of rhythm? Rhythm exists in the poetry itself, but also while you translate it, when we're actually composing design, we're constantly thinking of these things. And rhythm is a principle of design as well. So it became very relevant, and it fit in really well.
Yeah, we also tried to think of also verses that we took from this, from the poetry that kind of spoke about, closer to typography and design in some ways. And we thought it would be really nice to also think about how this idea of rhythm in Islamic art and Islamic ornamentation can be transformed and interpreted into contemporary design. So whether you are making, a flat or static composition, or that you are making a series of elements of compositions, how this movement moves from one composition to another, or if you are making a film and actually moving things, how do you then incorporate, sequencing and sound and on top of the visual and color and forms of letters. So,
and I think,
yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to, sorry, I thought you ended there, but, I think it's just, rhythm also felt very, very exciting because of how it can be interpreted, because of its broadness. It is also a very kind of, it's broad in the sense that it can take on so many it allows for room for exploration and play, but at the same time, it kind of creates a constraint in a way that would allow people to think about their submission in a much more specific way, I would say. More specific and less broad, in the sense that if you don't have rhythm as a theme, then it could be anything really. But because now you can start to see things from a specific lens, and this lens is the theme of rhythm.
Yeah, and also rhythm is not just music, because that's the first thing we think about when we say rhythm, but it's also about, the sequence of repetition, the way elements relate to each other. I mean, everything in the world is about rhythm, the way we breathe is rhythm, the way we move is rhythm, what we do on daily basis is rhythm. Our relationship to nature. Nature has its own rhythm. Every country has different rhythms. Every culture has different cultural rhythms and the way we do things. So it's always, in a way, it's connected also to this idea of time, and, that's something that takes its time. So you want to show, like when you say poetry, you take your time, you stop in some places, you exaggerate some words. So how do you interpret that in visual design is really interesting for us to explore. And also, I think something about the theme of rhythm makes it very open and very universal. So it, connects kind of the real world, the actual world, with the spiritual world, because the spiritual world is also about rhythm and sequence and time. And
which is exactly to why we'd notice as the developing the category or developing some specifications about the submissions, it is a little bit more open. So talking a little bit more of the criteria submission, you'd notice that there is a little bit more openness with whether it is the medium. So we have time-based, as we mentioned in the website. And then there's also print-based. So the audience, we wanted the participant to feel very open to interpret the theme as they will, and to interpret it in a way that comes to them when they're reading al-Burda. And you would notice in the category as well that we have specified 3, I think, verses, if I'm not mistaken, but we didn't limit the audience to only those 3. Those are our recommendations only. And again, because we wanted to encourage the audience and the participants to interpret it how they want to interpret it, whether it is the theme, and to keep it a little bit open as well. So I don't know if we want to talk a little bit more about the category and the criteria to kind of allow people to understand how to participate. But a general overview is there is a print base where you can submit a poster anywhere from A5, if I'm not mistaken, to A0. And then there is the time base, which is animation, if you wish, interactive design, motion graphics, and I think that's pretty much it. So we allowed the audience to interpret that theme, the theme of rhythm, in various mediums. And when we talk about rhythm, you can feel the movement. And when you read the Burda poem as well, you feel the movement. And the ones that we pick has a lot of descriptive meanings, which allows the audience to also go wild with their imagination.
Yeah. I mean, also I think we should also explain that, you know, the reason we say it's typography and not type design, and I think maybe it's important to clarify that, because everybody thinks of, you know, mixes the two terms. And we're not looking at, you know, how people design the letter forms, which would be type design, how they design a font, but more how they use a font in a composition. And so, of course, we're expecting that, you know, the compositions are using the Arabic letter forms. The Arabic letter forms can be drawn by the person who is, you know, digitally drawn by the person who is making the composition, but they can also use an existing font that they think is really appropriate and expresses the meaning. Of course, you know, that font has to be well drawn, and that's part of our evaluation in the longer term, to see like, okay, if you use a terribly drawn font, then that kind of dequalifies or disqualify the. But also we discussed, you know, this idea of, should you use the whole verse, or should you use parts of it, or should you use words, or even just abstract forms from it, using letter forms. And that part we think it's really interesting to keep it open, or to combine these things, you know. So depending what you as a designer want to express, and what you find aesthetically innovative and exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There is a question that I think would be very interesting to answer, which is, how does Arabic typography relate to Islamic culture in general? And to just start off the discussion about Islamic culture and the relation between Arabic typography and the Islamic culture, I think it's very, very important for us to kind of distinguish the Islam as a religion and Islamic culture and the Islamic art and architecture from each other. And in this particular competition, I think it's hard to define Islamic culture, but it's also important to look at the actual philosophy of Islamic art and architecture and design, and not to look at it purely from aesthetic a point of view. So it's not about necessarily only the patterns and the colors and the arches. It's not only about that. It's more about the itqan, the precision, the math. It's about the ethics, and it's about the principles that goes behind all of that, that represents the Islamic culture, that is not necessarily only aesthetic. So I'd really, really encourage whoever is participating in this competition, regardless of what category, is to do a lot of research about the philosophy of Islamic arts and architecture and design as well. Because it's quite important for us to understand the ethics behind it and the principles behind it. And maybe it doesn't necessarily look like the geometric patterns that we're used to seeing nowadays as Islamic, but it could be about the process. It could be about the itqan. It could be about the precision. It could be about the math, the formula that is behind it. In one of the talks that actually happened in Al Burda Festival years ago, I remember Ahmed Angawi, who's a product designer, was talking about how the beads back in the days in the craft of creating the beads, اللي هو المصباح, for meditating, wasn't necessarily about the mass production. When they created it, they used to meditate while they created it, which was very interesting. So there was more about the bead creation as a craft and meditation and process than just a final outcome. So I think it's very important to go more into research and look at the process of creating and the creation of the final product rather than our typical interpretation of Islamic art and design and the aesthetics that we look at right now. So I kind of went a little bit away from the question. I'm going to read the question, which is, how does Arabic typography relate to Islamic culture in general?
Well, I mean, I think it's, for me, it's also, I would add to what you said, I think it's really about the principle. And of course, you know, the Arabic script is really connected to Islamic culture. So that's, and typography is a sort of, contemporary interpretation of that. So in a way, it relates to contemporary Islamic culture in like simple, the short answer from my side. Salim, you had something you wanted to say. Your eyes are like question marks.
No. I was because it's really interesting to think about the presence of digital script today and what that means, because it, you know, when printing became accessible, in fact, it was kind of a taboo because the holiness of the script was the idea that the script can be created, you know, and mass produced and machine was not necessarily something that was looked at, you know, as something good. It was, you know, it kind of removed this spiritual or maybe even holy, I would say, you know, aspect or association that the Arabic script had. And so it became a taboo, and it's really interesting to just think about, you know, what that means today, and you know, the idea of creating, you know, or utilizing Arabic script in ways that we start to communicate. And I think by using Arabic script in producing the work that we produce as designers, we are collectively shaping up the Islamic culture in a way. Arabic and Islamic culture. So it's really important to, I think, go back to the same basics that, you know, Larnoud and Huda were talking about, which is the idea of itqan and thinking about Islamic culture, not only about religion, but also about who we are today, about, you know, thinking about our history, thinking about the future. The future and the diversity of what constitutes Islamic culture. So I think that's you know, and I think the idea that the relationship between Arabic script and typography is kind of it's a journey that happened, and it's evolving, and it will always keep evolving because of so many different changes that happen in our lives, whether it was technological or social or whatever it is. All these things affect the way that we interact with type. With script in general, and it also not only affects the script, but it also affects the way that we speak, the way that we behave, and all of that. And that is then projected back into the script and the way that we deal with the script as well, which is really interesting. And it's so I think it's I think that's my answer to that.
Yeah, I'd like to add to your answer also that it's very interesting. I mean, always in Islamic cultures it's always been diverse, and you know, calligraphy was kind of a visual representation of this diversity, that you see different styles and different calligraphic styles in different regions, and different ways of learning and practicing calligraphy in different regions of the Islamic world. And I think with typography it's kind of the same, and it's for a while it was not always like that. There were standard things that everybody did all over the Arab world. But now it's changing again. It's going back to this, you know, openness and like exploration of the heritage and exploration of what the heritage, the calligraphic heritage has to teach contemporary design. And that's something I think I would like to see also expressed in these entries. You know, how do we take, you know, our heritage that's so wealthy and then interpret it into something that is contemporary, that makes sense today. So it's not about copying, but it's about understanding precisely what Anud said, the philosophy behind the creation, the philosophy behind the drawing of these letter forms, or the creation of these fonts, or the creation of Islamic ornamentation, and how can design bring these together in a not superficial way, but in a way that expresses a deep meaning. And in this case, the poetry kind of helps in like giving you a springboard that you can start from the meaning, and then, let your imagination and the tools that you have, that you're capable of creating, feed into that.
Mm-hmm. I think what's very interesting about the new category this year is the fact that we're starting to see that it has been calligraphy and ornamentation and manuscript for a while, but the interesting thing is to kind of relate all of that to now, and to kind of reinterpret some of those principles that we've been studying about and hearing about for so long, and how to interpret it in our modern day. So I find it such an interesting mergence between Arabic typography and between Burda poetry, and applying some of those principles. So that's what's so exciting, in my opinion, about this new category. We have a question about how old is al-Burda, and how, so al-Burda as in al-Qasida, I don't have the dates, but it's quite old. From what I understand, it's Muhammad al-Busayri that wrote it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But al-Burda as a festival has been established in 2004. And it's now in the 16th edition. And it focuses on traditional Islamic art, calligraphy, and ornamentation, and poetry. Sorry, I forgot poetry earlier. And this year it has been, the typography has been introduced. So it's only a new category this year. Shall we take another question?
I think.
So this is actually, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, please go ahead. I mean, I'm looking also on possible questions, but I think, yeah, maybe it's interesting to talk about like a little bit what we, how would we evaluate the work? I think maybe just a few points. I mean, it can be very simple. I can
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of like in this discussion, we kind of explained what we think we expect. So in a way that is a bit what we would be evaluating on. But we wanted to, evaluate, I mean, for us, like there's three main things that are really important. First, the concept, the meaning of this composition. What is it trying to say? How creatively is it interpreting the message? Then, of course, the composition itself, how does it, express rhythm? How is it, well crafted? The choice of letters, how they are used, how they are, put in a composition. And of course, depending on whether it's a static image or a series or thing, then there will come other criteria that we would decide on. And I think that we will probably have different discussions between us, that things will come out also as we look at the work.
Yeah. And not to forget as well, sorry, Salam, not to forget as well that the concept as well, and the creativity of the idea, and the interpretation of the theme.
Yeah.
And something we forgot to mention as well is the fact that you can submit one poster if you want print, if we're talking about print, or you can submit a series of smaller posters. So that could also feed into that discussion that we had about the theme as rhythm. So that's a possibility as well. Sorry, go ahead, Salam.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. You're welcome.
We had one thing in the criteria that we mentioned, is that we wanted low resolution and small files, but that's only for the evaluation section. And then later on, people that are shortlisted and that will go in the exhibition, we would of course require high resolution and high definition films. So that for you when you're creating, to keep that in mind. I
think also just going back to the concept, maybe we We have selected 3 verses, but these are not necessarily the verses, as we mentioned before. You can select anything from the entire poem. However, the way that you're going to translate that, of course, concept is extremely important, but the concept shouldn't be divorced from the way that you actually execute that concept. The execution should clearly show your concept. That being said, you may also submit abstract kind of posters that clearly shows that it has been created from a specific maybe letter form. It shows that it is based on typography, that you're utilizing digital fonts, or that you have created some kind of letter form or something like that. However, the abstraction, although the poster might not be readable, it needs to be expressive, and at the same time, it needs to accompany some kind of written justification or description of what is it that this poster is doing. Why is it doing it that way? Why is it abstracted in that way? It should be inspired and directly related to the poem itself. So that's just one thing that we wanted to clarify as well.
We got a question that I don't know which one of you is going to answer. Why did Qasidat al-Burda inspire you? That's a tough one. Well, maybe it's the whole festival is about it, but
yeah, I mean, we didn't choose the qasida per se. It's the whole festival is based on the qasida, and it's a qasida. If you kind of read into it, it's a little bit of a, I would say, harder Arabic, but it's a beautiful description. And there is a wasf al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then there is a lot of more descriptive narration of the story. And there is something quite poetic about it, obviously. And then there is something quite rhythmic. And even if you don't fully understand some of the meanings, you still appreciate the strength of the words and of the Arabi. It's quite known to be a very powerful piece of poetry. And I do encourage everyone, whether participating or not, to actually go over Al-Qasida on YouTube. You can find it. You can find it actually played, so you can hear it. And I would encourage people that want to actually participate to get a little bit into that zone by hearing it a couple of times, putting some of the malid, whether Emirati or Masri or Syrian or the Moroccan, or look at the festival, the Burda festival, which is on YouTube. That has been recorded. They had a beautiful a ceremony where they had malid from different countries, and then they had the ending where they all come together. Absolutely beautiful. So I'd really encourage everyone to actually watch it, listen to it, put it in the house, listen to it in the car, to kind of just get you into the zone of understanding a little bit of that world, and something kind of will inspire you by just watching and hearing, but something would definitely inspire you. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think we got another question. Who can apply for this category, and who do we encourage to apply? I think that's
good question.
It's a good question. I would say everybody, but at the same time, of course, if we want to be fair, then it has to be somebody also who's got a background in design or visual arts, because then they are more likely to make something that is going to be, competing with with a certain standard. So, but there are people also that create beautiful work and have no education behind it. So I think it's really open for everybody. And yeah, please apply.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see
multimedia designers as well. Interactive designers. Some of the comments that I heard here and there is about how it feels a little bit intimidating as a student or a young professional to apply for a competition like that, and would really encourage you. This competition is specific, the new category is made for you. So I'd really encourage you to actually apply there. You're not losing anything by anyway applying. we actually encourage students, young professionals, design studios, whoever is interested, to kind of just give it a go, experiment, take it as a brief. Something that, whether it is you're sitting in a corporate job and kind of lack that creative projects, and take it as that, or if you're a student and want to do something that is outside your schoolwork, take it as that as well. I mean, I want to also do it for experimentation. I know, not flying, but experimentation purposes, just to kind of see what you come out come with as a result. And also, it's not only for Muslims. I know it says Islamic arts, and but it's not meant only for Muslims, because one of the questions I heard before. So anyone can interpret it, and it would be very, very interesting to kind of see people from different backgrounds and different cultures, to see how they would interpret it as well visually. I think that's very intriguing, and I think it gives us a lot more fun as judges to actually look into some of those entries.
And I
One
think,
of the questions, yes, please go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, no, because I think one of the things that I would like to remind people is that it's not only printed poster and animation. There's also an interactive digital application, an interactive submission for that. So a lot of students, I think nowadays, started to play around a lot with processing, with a lot of different interactive applications or code in order to create these kind of interactive applications, or even just simply JavaScript or whatever on web. And I think, it'll be really interesting to see what kind of, how are you able to interpret some of the verses from through the theme of rhythm, and create this kind of, maybe this interactive application, or maybe an interactive web page or something like that. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what I have no idea what kind of submissions will be submitted, and super excited for that.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the questions that came up was whether you need to be fluent in Arabic to actually submit. I think that's a very valid question. I mean, I think you are looking at a text that is classical Arabic. So if you can't read Arabic at all, then, and you can't understand the meaning, then it kind of disqualifies you, regrettably, I think, because then, unless you have somebody else reading it and explaining it to you, which is, then it's okay, I guess. But I mean, I think it's very important to convey the meaning that you are designing. So it's not about taking, a typeset text and then just playing with the letter forms. So that's...
I still think that there are translations of it in English that you could do a little bit of research, find the translation and hear it in Arabic, but also see the translation in English, and kind of see how you can interpret it, because that would be quite interesting, actually. It's quite an interesting challenge.
And I think also for those non-Arabic speakers who use Arabic script or a variation of the Arabic script in their languages, may be able to also submit. But again, echoing on what Huda was saying, that you need to be able to interpret the meaning. So you need to be able to understand the verses that you choose, and how you choose to take that and translate it and interpret it into something that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that probably will keep coming up is, how abstract can you be? I think then, again, I think, Salim, you touched on that if you're very abstract, you still have to kind of have a justification, so that when people are looking at it, they can actually relate to what you're trying to convey. Or at least, then it's relate to the verses that you are really trying to convey. So I think you can be as abstract as you like, as long as we still have a sense that this is really well expressed visually, or in other ways, that it expresses the meaning that you're trying to get, and that it is based on letter forms, Arabic letter forms.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Just to kind of remind everyone as well, the registration is July, they extended it. So now it's July 26th. And that's only to register for your interest to submit. And then you have a submission and uploading of your artwork, which is from July 26th till October 1st. So you have time to work on the submission until October 1st. But encourage everyone to just apply for or register for interest and to kind of start coming up with a concept. And then you'll have till October 1st, which is plenty of time to start generating your work.
There was a question that I don't know how to answer personally. We never thought about that, but I would think my answer is simple. But the question is, can you add other words in the work outside the poem? Or is it strictly using the words from the poem? I personally would feel better if you just use the words of the poem, because there is something, it is based on the poem, and it is based, if you're going to use words, then I think it would make sense to use the words of the poem, because they're very beautiful and they have a certain music and rhythm to them that expresses, the spirituality of the content. So if you start to add words that don't fit there, then I think it might lose a connection.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Words themselves
we've
are
never discussed this, so I don't know. This is my personal opinion.
The words that are in, first of all, the poem is very lengthy, so there are a lot of words in there. So there's no need to actually get more words from outside. But I think maybe the person who's asking is thinking of adding a word as a respond. Maybe their person will respond to it, maybe, or something like that. And maybe they can clarify. I'm with Huda on the fact that it is kind of sufficient to kind of use the words as they are, specifically if you're adding a word that kind of seems like it's part of the poetry, but it's not. So it kind of manipulates the poem in a not really in an interesting way. So I think we'd probably advise to avoid that. And again, there are plenty of words in the poem, so there's no need to kind of generate more words from outside.
I would agree. I think I don't see why it is necessary to add more words when you can start to manipulate the type itself in order for it to communicate what you wanted to communicate. It's like saying I'm not able to kind of manipulate the current words within this poem, so I will start to add other things to. This is how I feel about it, and I don't think you should add additional words. It just feels like it's an unnecessary kind of thing, because also if you add words, if you really think that it's really necessary for you to add words, then these words have to be extremely strong and is really something that is extremely relevant and really, like we will have 1,000 questions why these words are there, and I think it's better to actually edit out rather than add things to the poem. But if you choose like specific words from the poem and then start to use them as in order to kind of communicate with whatever you wanted to communicate, and again working with the theme of rhythm, I think is better than adding words that will make us ask more questions, like why did you add this word? What does that mean? How does it add to the entire concept and the composition and all these things?
Maybe I don't know if we have more questions. Not on.
There is a question that we received earlier. I don't know if we want to discuss that, or it might take us maybe a few hours to get into the actual answer. But how do you see Arabic typography's position on a global scale compared to other languages?
That's really off topic. I'm sorry. That's a lecture of 3 hours from each one of us. It's really
long.
It's very long. I think it's like in short answer, we're getting there. But I think somebody asked an interesting question right now about what do we expect the outcome of this new category? How does it add to the Burda Award? I think that's, let me just read it properly. What do you hope to see as an outcome of adding Arabic typography to an Islamic award like Al-Burda?
What do you see? What was the first part of the question? Sorry.
What do you hope to see as an outcome of adding Arabic typography to an Islamic award like Al-Burda?
I think, again, like I think when we're talking about the Islamic award here, we're talking about Islam, not as a religion, but as a more of an entire culture in art and visual communication. I think also, what do we think that it would do? I think for me, I think it really encourages the development of Arabic typography and really pushes, and I think this is great because we're having a lot of questions we had a lot of questions in terms of what is Arabic typography? What does it actually mean? And I think this is what the competition also started to do, is first introduced Arabic typography, which is a very strong tool today and is used to communicate and to read text, right? To read script. So it is. I think it's really important to look at what Arabic typography does and kind of place it, introduce it to a larger audience. And I think what it does in the context of this award is that it aligns the Arabic typography. So Arabic typography, there are so many usages for it, and it's really interesting to think about this, because Arabic typography could be used as a tool strictly to allow you to read a book, text
simple things.
Simple things. But also in this context is that we're actually trying to push Arabic typography in a way that, how can it become part of art? How can it start to do other things and not necessarily a very kind of direct, you're not directly, solving for a specific design problem. And it places it within other art disciplines as well. And I think it's really important to see that in this competition, because it sees you can start to see the flexibility of Arabic typography and typography in general as a kind of a genre, what it can do, and the flexibility of it. But also, I think the other thing is that perhaps the notion of script, I think there's a lot of or Arabic script specifically, and the idea that digital. I think in this case there's this kind of digital, the use of digital type, and within the Islamic kind of context, Islamic culture, there is a lot of maybe it's not rich enough. Maybe it doesn't have that kind of spiritual connection. However, I think, just thinking of Arabic typography, or the way we utilize Arabic typography, it is really a tool, and we use it to do whatever we want, whatever we want it to do. It becomes kind of, if we wanted to put it on a page and we want to communicate a specific message, we use it that way. I hope I'm making sense, but I'm just trying to say that there's this kind of maybe unsureness of where Arabic typography stands in terms of its relation to the modernization of Islamic culture. Maybe where does it stand in all of that? How do we see it? Do we see it as something that is very digital and something that we shouldn't touch, or should we see it or should we celebrate it more, that it's part of our Islamic identity today? And it's really interesting also, I think, just looking at typography and the way that it also started to working with, just recently I've been working with variable typefaces and Arabic variable typefaces, and it's really interesting to see how Arabic type designers have been trying to really what is the word? Be really creative for the lack. I didn't have my coffee today, so I'm just I'm losing my words. But it's really interesting to see how they started to really push the boundaries of Arabic script and the way that they're designing it, and how that also started to influence how people start to use Arabic script as well. And because of, I think, because of social media and communication, I think my answer is really long, but I'll try to say what I'm trying to say. Because of social media and because the world is, is becoming a smaller place, like everyone is being influenced and inspired by things that are happening all around the world, we can start to see how Arabic script is starting to have its kind of its own unique place, while also at the same time being connected to things that are happening globally, whether they're trends or events or whatever they are. But it's really interesting to see how we started, or Arab designers in a way, they started to utilize the Arabic script in their own way to reflect who they are today. And they're doing it in really creative ways. And I think this is why I think I'm really interested about the interactive application, because it's I'm really excited to see what happens there. But yeah, I hope, I mean, this is a really long answer to where Arabic typography stands within Islamic Festival. But I think that there's so many things that are interconnected, really. And I think we need to really think about this festival, not as Islamic as a religion specifically, but as an Islamic culture in its entire broadness. Because it's really broad when we say Islamic culture and not necessarily Islamic religion. Yes, it involves Islamic religion, but it also involves so many other things. It involves other religions that are influenced by Islamic or inspired by Islamic, or cultures that are or even people who utilize Arabic script but are not necessarily from the Islamic religion, yeah, so it's just in its broadness, really. And I'm really interested and really really interested in seeing the evolution of the Arabic script, how it was, where it is today, and where it's going to go. And I think through a festival like this, or through an award like this, we try to, opening up a category like this, we start to also, in a way, take in and document the time that we're at. What are the conversations that are happening, or the trends that are out there? How are they influencing the way that people are designing and responding to this poem? If we had this category 10 years ago, it would have been very different. The responses are going to be very different. If we're going to have it 10 years from now, it's also going to be different. And I'm saying 10 years because it's not a very long time, because things change and technology changes, and yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add, I mean, you've elaborated fantastically, Salem, on this. I think it's a very important point also to say, I mean, maybe as a way to wrap up also, I don't know if we're good on time, but to say something that, I think why it's important to have this category in a festival that is started as poetry, expanded to calligraphy and ornamentation, and then now it's about design. It's a way of connecting the heritage to contemporary design and contemporary life. And Salem explained that beautifully. But it's also, I think, important to think of typography not as just, something practical that, you have to have, and so you have to tolerate it, because that's what, a lot of attitude sometimes is, if it's printed, then okay, it doesn't matter, it's not real art. I think that's wrong. I think that it's important to see Arabic typography and the design of letter forms as essential building block of Arab culture and Islamic culture. This is really important because you see it everywhere. You don't see calligraphy everywhere. You see actually all the everyday things, and they influence the way we think, they influence the way we read, they influence the way we express ourselves, the way we identify ourselves. These are really important, and they are very subtle because, they're not put on a museum wall, but they are very important. So I think this is really fantastic that there is a category like this in a festival like that. That's my passion for being part of the jury also because of this. So this is my ending statement.
Let's also not forget that Islamic principles, and we've been talking about that quite a lot, was the foundation of the European Renaissance.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to understand that it has its history and it had its influences, and from music to art and craft and so much more. And it's kind of doing a full circle and coming back to us somehow. So it's kind of interesting now to kind of see how to stop dwelling on what it was and to kind of see where it could become. And I think that's again why this category is very important, to kind of reinterpret some of the things and revive some of the things that have been existing, but to kind of look at it min manzur jadid, which is a new perspective. So that's what's so exciting. And I think speaking on behalf of us and as well as everyone who's part of this festival, we're probably very excited to see the interpretations of all of that in the submissions, specifically like Salim said in the interactive time-based ones. It's actually quite exciting. One last reminder is that the winners of not winners, I don't like to say winners, but the submissions or the finalists will be, the work of the finalists will be exhibited in Expo in 2021 in December. So there will be a chance for the work to be showcased and everyone to have a look at it in Expo, hopefully in 2021. I don't know, Huda, if we have any other questions we should go over.
We have one question. We do have a couple of questions, but I will summarize, because one question about, whether you can have one poster or a series of posters, that's quite like explained. We explained it in the beginning. It's explained also on the website. So because we're running out of time, I'm going to skip that question. But the last question is about the interactive application, and that's a valid question, whether if it's a web page, does it have to be fully developed or developed live? I guess it doesn't have to be live.
No, it doesn't have to be live as long as we're able to see it and interact with it. Fully developed, so that it doesn't have broken code in places, and then we're not able to work the interactive application. We want to see it in its entirety, and just like all the other works, everything needs to be submitted in the best form that it can be submitted in, meaning it's executed and it's final, not a sketch or a draft.
I mean, I guess it doesn't, as long, if you go back to what is it, the message that you're trying to convey, and then I think then you have to decide how far you need to go as a website and as a web page and explaining your concept. So it depends on the concept that you're trying to express. But it could be also, as long as we can see it and understand your concept and have something sufficient to judge on. But it shouldn't break down and because then we can't see it, we can't view it.
Yeah, we have a question that says, how many winners are there? So we have the best of show, which is the winner of the best of show, and then we have 10 finalists. So we have the first place, that will be 70,000 dirhams award, and then we have the 10 finalists. Each finalist will get a 10,000 dirham award.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, we hope to see a lot of good work. We don't have any more questions, and I think we are good on our time also, even though we're very chatty, jury. But yeah, we are very excited about this, and we are really looking forward to like a lot of good applications. So good luck, and hopefully we meet soon.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.